Good evening. Welcome to the Goffstown Planning Board meeting of February 24th, 2011. My name is Alan Yates and I'm the chair. We go around the tables and introduce ourselves this evening.
I'm Brian Rose, I'm the town planner.
Philip Devanza, Selectman.
Lowell Von Ruden.
Gayla Breck, recording secretary.
Alan Yates, chair.
Collis Adams.
Tim Redmond, Vice Chair.
Carl Foley, alternate.
Good evening. The first item on our agenda this evening is the minutes of February 10th, 2011. And the only thing I had was on the next to last page. I think there's a misname for you, Tim.
I have the same note.
Back.
Thankfully, this will hopefully be the last meeting since only one of us at the next one.
Well, I'll let you take it then.
Page 7 of 7, I made it should be Tim Redmond, said Attorney Tierney has requested a ruling, not Tim Raymond.
Is that an amendment to the minutes?
Yes,
Yes.
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes with amendments.
okay, this is,
Give me a second so we can do it.
I'll second it.
Is that the only one you had?
It's the only one I had, I don't know if anybody else had.
Anybody else have any other comments? There's a motion by Phil, seconded by Tim, to approve the minutes
As amended.
as amended.
Yep.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you.
Well, you're on
Is that a
TV, Jim, it's
motion?
good
He
thing you
just
announced
said
it.
that on TV.
Okay.
Way to leave.
um,
Going out in style.
Item 2 on our agenda is map 38 lot 101 High Street site plan requesting to be continued. Brian?
Well, Mr. Chair, there's an email in there, just correspondence, I think, of the request that it's for the item under old business for map 38 lot 101 to be continued. The applicant is here tonight, but he basically said that he needs a little more time to get a plan drawn up and present it to the town for review. So if you have any questions, I can answer those.
How long does the applicant think it will take to get the requested plan?
His request was for an additional month, so the date to be continued would be March 24th.
Now, you and I have had some discussions, and other members of the board and I have had some discussions about having one meeting in the month of March because of the lack of items on our agendas. So, any comment relative to that, members of the board?
I know we already have a lot of things planned on the 10th of March, so we definitely couldn't delete that one. I don't know, does the schedule say that there's anything on there currently? That's the one that Patty put back on for, so that would be the only one. So if the board didn't want to meet on that date, we could try to push it to the next one the first one in April.
If there's action needed, we can set the date to a date certain, can we not? It has to be a motion, has to be voted on to continue.
To a date uncertain or a date certain?
To do a date certain, which would have been the first meeting in April.
Right, and I don't have the calendar in front of me for
Would
that.
ask the applicant, does that cause any particular problems for you?
It doesn't, and if the board prefers, I may be ready for the March 10th meeting if I could have an extension for submittal of the plan for the deadline.
Now, we did ask for rather simple modifications to those plans, if I'm not mistaken. It shouldn't be an extensive review, Brian?
He did tell me that he was planning on submitting at the end of this week or maybe early next week, I'm not sure when, but, so if plans can come in quickly, then, I wouldn't have any problem putting it on the 10th of March.
Members of the board? Do you have any questions of the applicant? And would accept a motion to continue
So move.
Second?
to a date certain, March 10th?
What date is it? March 10th?
March 10th.
324.
March 10th.
Well,
To a date specific,
that's fine, the 10th.
March 10th, 2011. Is there a second to the motion?
Yeah, I second it.
Seconded by Collis. Tim?
Originally, it was 324, now we're backing it up to 310?
Because we're not
Yes.
meeting.
There's an attempt to delete the second meeting in March,
Okay.
is what Chair is stating.
Okay, thank you.
Does that work for the applicant, that date?
Yeah, it does. I'm working with Kathy Prescaza, an architect in Goffstown, to provide the stamped plan which the board requested. And she has told me that she plans to have that completed by the middle of next week.
Okay. Any other questions of the board? Call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Hope to see you on the 10th. Thank you. Other action item for this evening is a memo from Brian Rose regarding Blackbriar Woods easement. Brian?
Okay, Mr. Chair, this is a memo sort of trying to get things wrapped up, hopefully for the Blackbriar subdivision. They've been before the Board of Selectmen several times and the Conservation Commission, I believe, as well. Basically, I bullet pointed 4 items on here that still need to be addressed by the planning board, I think. The first is the designation of open space, which is something I brought up last week, or 2 weeks ago at the last meeting. The second is the drainage maintenance system compliance hearing. The third is ownership of the easements on the open space. And the fourth is stewarding versus maintaining the open space. So the first thing is that the planning board needs to designate the open space into one of 4 categories that are listed in our development regs. The choices that are in the development regs are natural open space, farm reserve open space, recreation open space, and public access open space. And the only category really that fits with this project is the 4th one, the public access open space. The developer's engineer did actually state or reference this section in one of his statements to the planning board back on July 22nd. That section basically says that it's land which is to be deeded or provided by easement to a government agency or nonprofit land trust which agrees to provide public access to the open space. That's section 5T4A of the development regs, and that's the one that basically we're recommending that the planning board accept as the designated type of open space for this project. I did go through all the minutes, and that's what this big thick thing is, and I sort of tried to highlight the areas where it talked about the type of open space and what the intended use for the open space was. Not all of it is probably relevant to the discussion, but it's there for your reference if you wanted to look at it. But again, as I stated, I did go through there and I did find that the developer had already stated that that was the intended open space designation. So my recommendation is that the planning board find that the open space in this project be designated as public access open space. Secondly,
Mr. Chairman, Brian,
Yes, Tim?
may I suggest that we discuss these as we bring them up and vote on them, as opposed to running through them all, or do you want to vote on them as a package?
that's fine. I have no problem with
We
that.
can take one at a time if we want. So if the first one is designation of the open space, any members of the board wish to speak?
Well, I was gonna make a motion if you want one.
Yeah, I'm not quite ready. I want to see if anybody has anything to say.
No, I just simply, I think that's the proper category, and I think that's the right thing to do.
I move
Right,
that,
Kim?
I move that we clarify that our decision to expressly include the applicant's representation that this land would be public access open space as shown in the minutes, to include that designation as a condition of our approval, and we find that that is not a material change in our prior approval.
Second that motion.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Carlos. Any discussion on that motion? Members of the board, alternates? Brian? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, let's go to item 2 of your list,
Okay,
Brian.
this is basically maintenance of the drainage system. The conditions of approval, and actually the last page of your handout has the conditions of approval listed. And the appropriate condition is number 28 on the last page. That condition states, establishment of a drainage maintenance plan acceptable to the board to be presented at a compliance hearing to be scheduled within 6 months, to be held on or before April 14th, 2011. This compliance hearing will also address whether all of the other conditions precedent have been satisfied. Now, the town, in discussing this with the applicant, has agreed to take on the responsibility of the maintenance for the drainage system. So the applicant has approached the planning staff requesting to get a determination from the planning board if this condition is still applicable, if they still would be required to show a drainage maintenance plan, since now it's going to be under the town's responsibility. Their hope is that they wouldn't have to do that, and that they could, the planning board would remove that requirement. So really the only things remaining under that condition would be the rest of the conditions of approval, which typically would not be something that would have to come back to the planning board. Staff typically would go through and review all of those things, so I'll put that before the board for discussion.
Members of the board, is that maintenance agreement been worked out? Has it been?
To my understanding, the town has agreed to do that. I mean, I don't know what else.
Okay. Was that a vote? Was it at a public meeting? But I'll let Megan speak here also. Megan?
No, I was just gonna mention the plan that you're talking about, typically, an engineer would submit just recommended maintenance procedures, usually more for the private, ones, so we know what is expected of the property owner in the future. Sometimes they submit them even on a public infrastructure that we're taking over, just so we know what the engineer recommends, and, I mean, obviously, we could probably go look it up in, those sediment forebays or whatever in the new, green handbook from DES. If that's all that is needed, unless they recommend something different, I guess I'd just like to know that, even if it's a simple submittal from them or an email or something. Just in case, I don't want them, if there's ever a problem in the future, I don't want them to say, you didn't maintain it the way it should have been maintained. I'd kind of like to know what they are suggesting so that we can make sure it's, what we plan to do and stuff. So that's all. So I think we could still ask for something simple from them. But yeah, we did have some meetings, with Sue DeRusso, was the town attorney at that one? I don't remember.
Yeah, I know I've met with Sue and the applicant and a member of PLC discussing this, and it was brought up about the compliance hearing and whether or not a compliance hearing would still be required due to this change, I guess, that, they're not really doing the maintenance anymore on that. So that's the question, and I guess even if we do require a stated maintenance plan, or however that works, I don't know that it needs to be something that comes back to the planning board, as long as it's acceptable to Megan.
Jim?
If you recall, a butter had concerns about drainage, stormwater, rightly or wrongly, from this project. And if, on the basis of, if our requirement of a compliance hearing was in response to those abutter concerns, I question both politically and in terms of abutter notice, whether it's appropriate just to delete that because we think the town will do the right thing. That doesn't eliminate the concern that she or we would have just because it's now being done by the town and not the private developer. It's still the same issues, it's just a different responsible party. So I really question whether you want to waive this. It doesn't take much to hold a hearing. You notice it, you bring it forward, you tell us what they're doing, and you approve it. But to do it without notice when that was a material issue, I question whether that's appropriate. And we don't have a drainage plan in front of us. We just have a promise from Megan, who will do the right thing, that it will be done. Well, that's not the same, though. It doesn't create the public hearing process that a compliance hearing requires. So I don't think this one we want to just wait. Or if you're going to do it, have something in front of you that's a basis for it that makes it non-material. But I haven't heard that.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Brian?
Just, I guess in response, my recollection was that the reason we had decided to go with a compliance hearing was due to the fact that there had been changes in the AOT regs and that they were not sure exactly how this was all working out. I don't recall the abutter concerns being apparent in that meeting that we had decided on the compliance hearing. I do recall that they had some concerns previously, but I don't know if that was the reason for the change, and I don't know if that makes a difference or not, but just put that out.
Just additionally, the second sentence in that paragraph said the compliance hearing will also address whether all the other conditions precedent have been satisfied, and we haven't done that yet either, if I'm not mistaken. But Carlos, you had your
What
hand.
would be the downside of holding a compliance hearing? It doesn't seem like it's that great a effort. And we talk about it as a condition, and it's out there, and it's
Okay.
part of the record, so why would we not hold one?
Tim?
I'm agreeing with everyone. I think we should have the compliance hearing, at which time the engineer of record could submit the suggestions to this board and the town engineer for review to be sure that they're all in properly done, so the DPW can carry on and make sure it gets taken care of properly in the future.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Brian?
I believe one of the reasons that the applicant is trying to get this requirement eliminated is due to his timing with the market and everything. I know that that's not really a reason to make a change here. However, I'm also now hearing that the board is looking at potentially deleting its second meeting in March. That would significantly delay this applicant because there's not enough time between now and our next meeting to put out a public notice. There's a 2-week notice requirement.
Maybe we are gonna have a second meeting in March.
Yeah.
So what?
Go in April.
It's also the first meeting in April. Other members of the board? Phil, do you have anything from the selectmen's side that
No.
affects this issue?
No, just that the compliance hearing was, we had discussion on that when this was made. that it would, as it stated, would also address whether all the other conditions precedent have been satisfied. So I think there's more than one reason for the compliance hearing.
All right. Megan, any final comments, words of wisdom? Okay. Hearing none, anybody want to move forward with a motion on this? I get the feeling that we'd like to have a consensus of the board would like to schedule a compliance hearing. At that time, the drainage maintenance plan will have been submitted and somewhat reviewed so that they understand what the town is accepting as their responsibility. Yes, Megan?
I just have a suggestion, so the deadline to have the compliance hearing was what, April 11th?
14th.
No, it's April.
Okay, so that is that is our first meeting in April. So I mean,
It actually says on or before.
Right, on or
so it
before.
could be on, I
Okay.
was gonna say if it wasn't gonna work, I was thinking they have the right to continue it at this meeting, to
Okay.
give them extra time.
All right, Collis?
I personally don't have a problem with having another meeting on March 24th.
Okay.
I think this is important. This applicant's been put out long enough.
Mhm.
I think this is important to him, and I think we owe it to him to move it forward.
Okay.
I don't mind meeting on March 24th specifically for this purpose.
I don't either, as long as there's something worthwhile on the agenda. I'm not gonna recognize anybody from the public out there. Patty?
You do have an application that came in today for the 24th.
There we go.
Dearborn Village, they're requesting a time extension and
There we
an
go.
amendment to their condominium plan.
Here I thought I'd get a night off.
Sounds like a meeting to me.
Not gonna happen. All right. Well then,
Do you need a motion?
Is that a motion?
I didn't make any motion.
I'll make a motion.
Chair can't make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we schedule the compliance hearing. Yeah, for March 24th.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tim. Any discussion on the motion? I want to move the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Ownership and easement of the ocean space. Brian?
Okay. The third thing is alternative options for the ownership and maintenance of the open space have been explored by the town. The selectmen ultimately did decide that they wanted to own the open space with the PLC taking a conservation easement on the land. The easement has not been fully executed by the town, by the selectmen at this time. However, it's in the attorney's hands and review is ongoing with that. The selectmen have decided that they would like some areas exempted from the open space in order to be able to do some parking or restroom facilities for any persons wishing to go up and use that open space for hiking and whatnot. Those, I've included a schematic drawing in your packet showing the locations of those areas. And the easement would reflect those areas as being exempt from the conservation easement. So basically that is basically before you for comment and review.
So you're saying those two outlined areas, which are mainly the water treatment facilities areas?
Basically, yes, where the detention ponds would be, around the areas where the detention ponds would be, that those areas would be exempt from the conservation easement. The town would be able to perhaps create some parking areas along the edge there.
Okay. Jim?
Well, I'd be curious the Conservation Commission's view in that, because you can give a conservation easement and reserve certain rights. For example, when you give a conservation easement on your land but reserve the right to build one house or two houses or whatever you want, And if the goal of the conservation easement was, one of the goals was to make sure this is tied up forever and the town cannot change the use because the town otherwise, as sovereign, has that right, you would grant a conservation easement on all of the open space, but reserve the right in certain envelopes to do certain things. That way, the town can't later change its mind as to those envelopes if they're not, which would be the case if they're not subject to the conservation easement. So if that was a goal, then you would have the easement on the whole, but reserve those rights. If we don't care and we trust the town, and which of course we will, then this works, but you can do either way. And if the condition of our approval was that it be all subject to a conservation easement, and that was stated, then this question is this a material change or not? Maybe, maybe not, but I think we at least should address that.
Conservation Commission have any weigh in on that subject?
I'm the chair, but I'm gonna let David Neiman speak because he's the chair of open space and he's been dealing with this project more than myself. So go ahead.
David?
I participated in initial discussions with the Board of Selectmen, and there was a lot of confusion in the beginning and a lot of disagreement on the two sides, and a lot of discussion about not even having an easement. Eventually, though, the selectmen have come around to the position of agreeing to the concept of the easement and understanding that that was part of this whole approval process. The latest details that you've just been presented with in terms of what areas would be exempted from the easement has not been presented at all to the Conservation Commission. In fact, we were shut out from the last portion of the negotiations, not invited to participate or understand what was being proposed. So the Conservation Commission has not weighed in on these last details because we have not had the opportunity to view them.
Phil?
If the board recalls, when the planning board made a recommendation for the public hearing, the recommendation stated acceptable to the town, a conservation easement acceptable to the town. And I asked the board at the time, what was the intent of the meaning of the town? And I was specifically told the Board of Selectmen with that. So I would have to respectfully disagree that they were shut out. The Board of Selectmen proceeded under the direction from the planning board, which was to negotiate an easement acceptable to the Board of Selectmen, which is what we did. And I'd like to read a memo to you from the Board of Selectmen, and I have a copy that I can give to the secretary. It's dated February 24th to the Planning Board from the Board of Selectmen regarding Blackfriars subdivision. In October 2010, the Board of Selectmen conducted a site walk of the Blackfriar open space. Following that site walk, we had several discussions regarding uses of the open space. We envisioned this open space as a destination for nature trails with picnic areas, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, with a warming hunt. As a destination area, we feel it is important to offer parking and restrooms. We would need to carve out a small area, approximately 2 acres, for such purposes. We held our 2 required public hearings on January 3rd and January 17th, 2010, to accept the open space. On January 24th, the Board of Selectmen voted to accept fee simple interest in the open space. We assumed that the planning board was designating this open space as public access open space under Appendix E, Section 5T4 of the Development Regulations. If this is a correct assumption, then the Board of Selectmen has no issue accepting the fee simple interest in the open space. However, we would need to exclude the area for parking and restroom facilities from any PLC conservation easement. The only other condition we would need in the PLC conservation easement would be for vehicle access for the purposes of public safety and maintenance. If the planning board and/or developer cannot proceed without a finalized conservation easement because of timing issues, then we would respectfully request that the planning board consider another option. That is, the town would accept fee simple interest without a conservation easement. The town would manage this property in accordance with the public access open space provisions in the town's development regulations.
Pretty simple to me. Members of the board, call us.
I understand what Jim's saying. I work with a lot of easements, and I know you can reserve all kinds of rights as long as you negotiate them with a potential easement holder, but I think in this case, we're talking about infrastructure here. I don't know why we'd want to cloud a conservation easement with issues pertaining to infrastructure. It's a lot cleaner, a lot simpler to take them out of the easement, in my opinion. I mentioned this at Conservation Commission meetings as well. I think it's a cleaner, simpler route to go. It's cleaner for the town, it's cleaner for the PLC, and I think it's the only thing that makes sense to me.
What you're saying is these two proposed easement areas are,
Take them out.
Lowell?
Yeah, I would agree that, and I think the two areas are so small, but it's not like you could really develop it into something big anyway. Because most of it is taken up by drainage structures.
Carl?
I was just gonna say, the majority of the easements are completely encompassed by the drainage and the access to the drainage. So I don't have a problem with those two areas.
Tim?
Well, somebody's got to be opposed to it, and I think I would be the one. I think that if the town has any intentions of building restrooms and parking areas in the subdivision, I think you're going to make the subdivision fail. I don't think people are going to want to buy homes in a subdivision that has public parking areas and public restroom areas for the trail use system. I think it's going to defeat the purpose of creating a neighborhood. I have no problem with maybe a parking area for people to park and utilize the property, but I don't think that restrooms of any sort are an appropriate thing to be inserting into this open space area.
Bill?
Jim can go. I've already gone.
Jim?
That raises a question of, and first of all, if we're going to change it, we could put in our motion that it's not a material change because of the reasons, Carl said, this land is subject to all the drainage stuff anyway. Stuff, it's a legal term. But if it's owned by the town, then is there any review by this board of the town's proposal? The town's not subject to our jurisdiction, so it could just do what it wants. So we want to have some review of that.
Could be part of the motion. Anything that the town decides to do has to come before the board
You can't require that, though.
for a hearing. Bill?
Just a comment, a follow-up on that. I don't really have a problem with that, because in the past, the town has always come to the planning board for approvals. We
Okay.
came to the planning board for approvals for a transfer station that we built. And we've come here for approvals of all the other projects that we've come. In the meantime, we came here for the Parry property,
Okay.
for any excavation, and we've come here for the Barnwell property.
I like the water precinct that comes and then ignores what we tell them.
Well,
I haven't gotten over that.
hearing all those stories, is somebody wishing to make a motion on this topic, please?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to remove those two designated areas from the conservation easement.
I'll second that.
We need to go a little further than that, I think.
Yeah.
Jim?
You might add that we find it's not a material change
Right,
because
right,
of the
yeah.
nature of the development.
A little
blah, blah,
jumped in a
blah.
little quicker than I.
Oh, I thought you were done.
Yeah, but as Jim said, make a finding that's not a material change, and also that at any point, if there are plans to utilize it, it needs to come before the board.
You want to amend your second, Lowell? Second's been amended. Any discussion on the motion? Call the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Chairman votes yes. Motion carries. Brian, number 4.
Okay, this is an easy one, I think. This is basically just for your information. It sort of came up in discussions with the selectmen and the PLC that the intention of the PLC is not to maintain, as was a stated comment, and you actually see that in several of your highlighted portions of the minutes that you have attached there, that the intention was stated that it was for the PLC to maintain the property. Maintenance is not the same thing as stewardship. Stewardship is what the PLC intends to do on the property, and that's basically just to ensure that the conservation easement is followed, that the land and the regulations within the conservation easement document are adhered to. And they would provide once an annual report. They would go out to the property and check it once a year and provide a report stating whether or not it's in compliance. And so that's the extent of what the PLC plans to do.
Members of the board, I think we need to probably have some discussion and a motion that we accept stewardship as recommended by somebody.
So moved.
Jim?
Well, question, I recall the applicant had nice pictures of trails, and trails need to be maintained, and if they're gonna operate, if that was the recreational plan, there has to be some way to build them and maintain them, and I think a lot of ways of doing it. The town reserves the right to build and maintain trails, then it has the option to do it, or get some volunteers to do it. We can't compel Schaghticoke to do that. They don't do that. But that doesn't mean it can't be a reserved right that somebody will do. But I don't think, otherwise you have to, grant a conservation easement, you have to retain some rights to do things. And if the trails are part of it, we have to make sure it's addressed somehow in the conservation easement.
I thought it was an easement, was my
That
understanding.
is part of the easement language, that trails are allowed as a use on that.
But I suspect that we have to come back with a plan to PLC if you want to do anything up there, to secure their stewardship approval.
But typically, your easement then would spell out some, I'm not playing town council here, making sure you want to address that up front.
Then it would accept a motion with some kind of reference to that. Well, this is the last motion of the last day of your term. Are you gonna do it or not?
I gotta get you guys used to making your own damn motions, so. Maybe I won't. Okay, I move that we approve the, I don't know what we're approving, that the change that PLC will assume responsibility for stewardship, not maintenance, that we find in the context of the use of this property. That's not a material change, but we might recommend that the easement address the rights and some obligation by somebody to build and maintain trails. Leave it up to brains greater than mine.
Leave off the last four words, but is there a second to that
I'll
motion?
second that.
Seconded by Carlos. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll move the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. And one last item. We talked about the 10-year plan. Has anybody got anything they want to add to it? I'd like to add the 114 intersection that has been discussed at times with the Economic Development Council in terms of future development on 114. I think that should be added as part of our,
The new intersection.
the new intersection should be added to our 10-year request. And I'd like it just to have some motion from the board saying, asking, designating Brian to make sure that that happens.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And I'm gonna call a recess and allow a representative of the Board of Selectmen. Yes, David?
Is it too late to ask one more question about Blackbriar?
After we get done with this, then.
Is it, do you want it on a public record?
Yes.
Well, the meeting's not closed.
I'm just calling a recess.
Okay.
Turning, reneging the chair to the Board of Selectmen. Who's representing the selectmen?
You know, these agendas are so light, this is
Yeah.
fun.
That one's yours.
A little different than listening to
Come back as an alternate.
I might. So don't make these too prolonged, because I'll change my mind.
You can't go home yet because I still owe you a beer.
I know, I'm gonna collect.
Bill,
Yes, sir.
you have the floor.
Okay, I have the floor, thank you. And I have to apologize for our chairman who waited, but he had to, an important engagement that he had to be at for 8 o'clock, so he did have to go. So I have our illustrious secretary here for holding a couple of things. I'd like to ask Jim if he could come up here for a minute. Jim? You know, I've served with you on and off the board as selectman's rep over the years. And there's been many different projects that's come before the board. And as was stated before, they always look to you to make some of the eloquent commentary needed in order to get forward and move the projects along. And actually, as was stated before, might be a little difficult or a little harder to go forward, or perhaps a smoother, and there might be a few bumps in the road without your presence here. So on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, I'd like to give you a proclamation. Okay, that's there. I've got all these kinds of papers in here, and I apologize, but if you can just show everybody that, what it looks, it's a proclamation from the town of Goffstown, and it's one of those things that has all those whereases in it. And I think Jim is familiar with the whereases, because he reviews all of those, especially in those types of easements and everything, whereas this. Whereas a proclamation is a means whereby the town of Goffstown may honor the dedication of those individuals who serve the town. And whereas James Raymond began his service on the planning board as an alternate in April of 1992, meaning he has provided 19 years of service as a member of this board. And whereas Jim has been the main proprietor in the revision of our planning, zoning ordinance, and development regulations over the years, which was a significant and important task requiring a high level of competency and dedication. And whereas Jim has been an invaluable source of legal expertise and judgment in all matters that have come before the board, as well as a source of guidance for its members, and the board will be sorely diminished by his absence. And now therefore be it resolved that we, the Board of Selectmen for the town of Goffstown, county of Hillsborough, state of New Hampshire, by virtue of the authority vested in us, do hereby honor James Raymond in recognition of his extensive years of service and dedication to the town of Goffstown. And we, the Board of Selectmen of the town of Goffstown, county of Hillsborough, state of New Hampshire, by virtue of the authority vested in us, do hereby proclaim that February 24th, 2011, be designated as Jim Raymond Day throughout the town of Goffstown, New Hampshire, and I urge all the citizens, and you don't get any extra paper.
Only got 4 hours left, you better make it good.
Not done yet, not done yet.
There you go.
And, Jim, I'd like to present a plaque to you. James Raymond, in appreciation and recognition of 19 years of dedicated service as a planning board member of the town of Goffstown, 1992 to 2011. Goffstown Planning Board, congratulations, appreciate it.
Well, if I may, I'm not leaving town.
We got one more.
Oh, good grief.
Always many Thursday nights, we took you away from Jane, we're giving you back a couple of nights to go out and have some fun.
Thank you. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm just taking some time off. You know, I think I want to do that for a number of reasons, because I got some other commitments, but I'm still here. And, you know, community service is still important. But the reason I was late tonight was I was talking at the Y in Concord
Always late.
with Jeff Myers, who is now governor's counsel, but you recall is Milton Myers' son. And he reminded me, when I told him I was going to retire, that Milton had 34 years on the planning board. So I guess the lesson is get out with a 19 years is nothing, but thank you.
Very welcome.
Thank you.
Jim, what's the
Thank you all for coming. And Andrew, how am I doing on the mic?
Awesome.
Finally, my last day.
The chair is back, and I have just one observation of Mr. Raymond. I first met Jim when I was an applicant before this board in 1995, and he read me the Riot Act. Because I got a variance on my frontage of my subdivision on Hillcrest Road, against the best judgment of the planning board. So, justice is served from time to time. But since being a member of the board, 2005, I've enjoyed Jim's presence here, and he's saved me more than once. So I say thank you. And the beer will be later. And the community thanks you. Any members of the board wishing to have a little words of wisdom from Mr. Jim?
You can do it over beers.
We'll save it for when we're not on camera.
Then I will accept I don't believe there's any other business before the board this evening, no?
Yes, somebody,
Oh, poor David, sitting there patiently. David,
I really hate to bring it up, I mean, I don't wanna
that's okay.
spoil the mood.
You've got 30 seconds, David, that's it.
I just wanted to clarify, so in the final, this conditional hearing for Blackbriar, that the easement is in fact a requirement, along with the land going to the town, that it's not decoupled in some way, that we're guaranteed the selectmen go through with this part of the commitment. My faith is a little dim in this regard. I just want to be sure that it happens and point out that every public hearing before this board and every public hearing before the Conservation Commission and both public hearings before the Board of Selectmen, in every single time it was adamantly clear that the land goes to the town with an easement to the PLC. Should that easement not happen, then that would be in conflict with every public hearing on this project that abutters have been to, that people were noticed to. So I just want some assurance that that conditional hearing, that the conditions have been met, will also verify that the easement has been taken care of.
Okay, thank you, David. We all take that under advisement. Hearing no other items before the agenda, I'll take.
Motion to adjourn. No, you make the motion. You make the motion.
Withdraw your motion. Withdraw my motion.
We have a motion from Jim
So
to
moved.
adjourn.
Seconded by Jim Raymond.
And seconded by Jim Raymond.
Still follow.
Seconded by,
But that way Gail can get it wrong one more time.
seconded by Phil.
I
All
could
those
do
in
that on
favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion adjourned. Accepted.
Oh, I do have one final action.
Yes, sir.
I was given some grief.
Do you want the camera on there?
When I was issued this, so
No, I think you should take that in good faith.
Giving it back.
I gotta save the town some money. Sue would like that.